Ever wonder what happens when HOA tyrants pick the wrong house to threaten? I never imagined that my peaceful retirement would involve struggling to survive financially until they hit us with a fraudulent $10,000 special assessment that would bankrupt half the retirees in our community. These bureaucratic extortionists thought they could drain our life savings with fabricated charges, but they had no idea who was staying in my guest house. What happens when purebred American muscle meets HOA crooks wielding stolen clipboards from senior citizens? After 30 years of hard work in the factory, all I wanted was peace in my golden years. Elderwood promised exactly that, a quiet community where I could enjoy the American dream I had worked so hard to earn. For 15 years, I had had exactly that: good neighbors, reasonable rules, and the freedom to enjoy my retirement. That all changed last spring when Jonathan Sterling moved in. The man exuded corporate arrogance from every pore, fresh from a big city executive position with his designer suits and fancy cars. It didn't take long for him to set his sights on running our community. "Just want to contribute," he said at the homeowners' meeting, "to bring professional management to our little neighborhood." What he didn't mention was that he'd collected proxy votes from half the winter vacationers who were gone for the season. Before we knew it, he'd seized control of the HOA presidency through a technicality most of us didn't even understand. The changes came quickly. First, a 35% increase in our monthly HOA fees for improvements Sterling claimed, even though we never saw any. Then came his enforcement team, his twin nephews, both former military police with cropped hair and permanent frowns. He hired them as community compliance officers, giving them matching polo shirts with embroidered badges that looked almost real. Now, I wasn't exactly Sterling's favorite resident to begin with. 3 years ago, I led a successful challenge to the previous board's illegal special assessment. Being a neighborhood patriarch comes with responsibilities, and one of them is standing up when things aren't right. Other residents call me the protector of Elderwood behind my back. I just call it being a good neighbor. The tension was palpable every time I attended meetings after Sterling took over. He would glare at me from his makeshift throne at the head of the community center table, tapping his expensive pen on a copy clipboard. "Mr. Johnson," he said at the end of a particularly heated discussion about new landscaping requirements, "some people don't belong in communities like this. Perhaps a less demanding living situation might suit your particular lifestyle." The threat wasn't even veiled. The battle lines had been drawn. It started with the letter, official HOA letterhead, bold red text, special assessment required, $10,000. I nearly collapsed on my kitchen chair as I read the details, which were supposed to be for critical infrastructure upgrades and community enhancement projects, all of which had to be paid in full within 30 days or face late fees, penalties, and eventual property liens. With a fixed retirement income, I could be asking for $1 million. The letter trembled in my hand, not out of fear, but out of pure outrage. This can't be legal, I told myself, calculating how many of my neighbors, mostly retirees like me, would be financially devastated by this sudden demand. The fine print was even worse. Non-payment would result in 22% compounded annual interest, with the HOA reserving the right to place a lien and initiate foreclosure proceedings after 90 days. The emergency community meeting was packed. Frightened seniors filled every chair, many lining the walls. I stood at the microphone, assessment notice in hand, my voice steady though my blood pressure was surely reaching dangerous levels. "I fought for this country," I said, looking directly at Sterling, "put my brothers through the jungle hell of Vietnam. I will not let you rob my neighbors of their retirement security with this fraudulent scheme." I presented documents showing that neighboring communities with similar infrastructure had paid a fraction of the amount. I questioned why no bids had been taken from contractors. I demanded financial transparency. The room erupted in applause, but Sterling only smiled. He turned off my microphone mid-sentence. "The assessment has been duly approved by the board. Payment plans are available, with appropriate interest, of course." "Next speaker, please." Bill Simmons, my neighbor and Vietnam veteran, pulled me aside after the meeting. "Jim," he whispered, glancing around nervously, "this is bigger than you think. My daughter works at the county recorder. She found something." He handed me a folder. Sterling's investment group had just registered a new LLC called Elderwood Redevelopment Partners. They were planning to build luxury apartments where our house stood. That night, I checked the documents and did some more research. It turned out that Sterling was more than just a former corporate executive. His investment group specialized in buying up entire communities through manufactured financial misery, first taking over the HOA, then making impossible financial assessments, finally foreclosing on those who couldn't pay and buying properties at auction for dirt cheap. The $10,000 assessment wasn't for infrastructure. It was specifically designed to force retirees on fixed incomes to foreclose. This wasn't just a cash grab. It was a calculated plan to steal our homes and our community, which for me was the first hurdle because I understood HOA law. When I began openly questioning the $10,000 assessment at neighborhood gatherings, Sterling's tactics took a darker turn. A mysterious official credit assessment appeared, flagging my property for financial instability even though my mortgage had been paid off for years. Just standard procedure for noncompliance with a high-risk assessment, Sterling explained with a smirk when I confronted him, sliding a document across the table. "However, we were able to speed up your foreclosure due to your verbal objections." The document outlined how they could speed up the specific debt process for my property to 30 days instead of the standard 90 days. That same week, my bank called about troubling activity. Someone had attempted to access my retirement account and freeze my savings. The bank's investigation traced the request to an IP address at the HOA office. At an emergency board meeting, I asked Sterling to cut off my microphone as I presented evidence of targeted financial harassment. "Your time to speak is over, permanently," he announced. "Perhaps if you had focused more on paying your bills instead of disrupting the progress of the community, you wouldn't be in this unfortunate situation." I left that meeting knowing the game had changed. This was no longer just about money. This was psychological warfare against anyone who stood in the way of their lucrative plans. My financial counterattack was immediate. With the threat of foreclosure looming, I needed legal resources and public attention. Converting my guest house into a rental apartment would generate the income needed to hire the HOA fraud attorney Bill Simmons had recommended. As if by divine intervention, the phone rang that night, a voice I hadn't heard in decades. "Jim, it's Marcus from the 3rd Battalion." Marcus. We served together, fought together, almost died together in Vietnam. Hadn't spoken in years, but that was the way it was with brothers in arms. Time meant nothing. "I have a friend who needs a quiet place to stay," he explained, "someone who understands what you're dealing with this HOA situation. He's working on a project on community corruption and has heard about your fight." When I asked who, Marcus was cryptic. "Let's just say he has the resources and the public platform to shed light on what's going on in Elderwood, but he needs privacy. Too many cameras these days, too many people will recognize him." I agreed without hesitation. At this point, I needed all the allies I could get. Sterling's intelligence network must have discovered my financial maneuvers. Within 48 hours of closing the lease with Marcus's mysterious friend, an envelope arrived containing something disturbing, a photo of me meeting with a prominent HOA litigator, along with copies of my personal financial records. Attached was a handwritten note: "Fighting this will cost more than paying it. Sell now while you still have equity." That night, my security system alerted me to movement on my property. The footage showed the twins, dressed in black, placing something in my mailbox. It was a thick document labeled "Expedited Forfeiture Proceedings," with tomorrow's date and the county courthouse address. But I also discovered something they didn't know I had: a hidden camera I'd installed in the community center after the last confrontation. Reviewing that footage showed Sterling meeting with what appeared to be the developers, spreading out architectural plans on a table. Zooming in, I could see the title, Elderwood Luxury Apartments Phase 1. This wasn't just about my house anymore, it was about wiping out our entire community. When I called Bill to share what I'd found, his voice was strained. "They've sped up, Jim. 3 more residents received foreclosure notices today, all seniors questioning the assessment. My daughter found something else in the county records. They applied for a rezoning permit. My son's military unit was receiving an awards ceremony that weekend, and I had promised months earlier I would attend. I had to fly out that afternoon, but the timing couldn't have been worse with a foreclosure hearing scheduled. Don't worry, my mysterious tenant assured me through the guest house door, still respecting his privacy. I'll make sure your voice is heard at that hearing. I've dealt with corporate bullies all my life, man." There was something oddly familiar in his voice, something I couldn't place. In the middle of my son's ceremony, my phone exploded with notifications. Neighbors were sending video clips, news links, and excited messages I couldn't understand. Then a message from Bill. "You won't believe what happened in court. Your friend just changed everything. Come home as soon as you can." I spent the entire flight wondering what could have happened. When my taxi pulled into the Elderwood residences, I noticed something strange. Residents were gathered in small groups on their lawns, talking animatedly. Some were actually laughing. A few were waving American flags. It looked almost festive. Monday morning, 8 a.m., my doorbell camera alerted me to a full-on tactical approach, if suburban intimidation can be called tactical. Sterling in his tailored suit, the twins in matching HOA polo shirts, a man with a leather briefcase who could only be a lawyer, and, most disturbingly, 2 men with security company patches on their shirts, their hands near their equipment belts. Over the doorbell speaker, I heard Sterling's smug announcement, "Mr. Johnson, we are here to inspect and deliver your final eviction notice. Open the door immediately, or we will be forced to record your refusal to comply." I watched from my kitchen as they waited, Sterling checking his expensive watch. I hadn't told them I was gone. They must have assumed I was hiding inside. The door to the guest house opened. A hulking figure emerged, moving with surprising grace for someone of such a large stature. From my vantage point, I could only see his back, broad shoulders draped in red and yellow fabric, long blonde hair draped in a red bandana. As the figure approached my front door, Sterling took an instinctive step back. The twins exchanged nervous glances. The security men shifted their stances, suddenly uncertain. My front door swung open with dramatic force. There, filling the entire doorframe, stood the 6 feet 7 inches purest American wrestling legend, 24-inch python arms, muscled beyond anything genetics should allow, flexing automatically as Hulk Hogan placed his hands on his hips in his signature pose. The twins physically backed away into the bushes, recognition flashing across their faces as their mustaches twitched and a familiar intensity beamed down on them. "Well, well, well," Hogan's voice echoed through the neighborhood. "Looks like some white-collar paper pusher thinks they own the street, man." Sterling, to his credit, tried to maintain his composure. "We're here for official HOA business. This property is in violation of—" "The only violation I see," Hogan interrupted, stepping forward as everyone else automatically retreated, "is against the American way. The only thing that gets you kicked out today is your abuse of power, man." The security men backed into their cars. The lawyer held his briefcase to his chest like a shield. And the twins, they looked like they'd seen a ghost that could squash a Buick seat. Hogan reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone, aiming it at the group. "Smile for my 20 million followers, folks. Hulkamania is about to run wild on HOA tyranny." They scattered like bowling pins, nearly tripping over each other in their hasty retreat. As they sped away in their cars, Hogan's laughter echoed through the neighborhood. I stepped out to join him, hardly believing my eyes. "Marcus, you're Hulk Hogan," I managed to stammer. He turned back, the familiar smile spreading beneath his iconic mustache. "Surprise, man." As we sat on my back deck, the connection couldn't have been clearer. Marcus wasn't my Vietnamese friend who became Hulk Hogan. He was the retweeter who connected me to the wrestling superstar. I've never told many people about my financial advocacy work, Hogan explained, sipping his iced tea. I've been quietly funding legal protections for seniors targeted by corporate predators for years. He showed me news clippings on his phone, Hogan testifying before state legislatures about elder financial abuse, Hogan setting up a fund for veterans facing housing insecurity. My parents almost lost everything to a similar scheme in Florida, he continued, developers using HOA assessments to force retirees on fixed incomes out. I've made it my mission to fight back. He explained how he had kept in touch with Marcus over the years, and when Marcus heard about my situation through the Veterans Network, he knew to call Hogan. I was filming American Heroes Fight Financial Predators, documenting how ordinary people are standing up against corporate takeovers of their communities. When Marcus told me about his HOA situation, I recognized the pattern immediately. These vultures follow the same playbook coast to coast. Hogan looked at the documents I had collected and realized something I had missed. Sterling's company had been successfully sued in 3 other states for similar schemes, always settling quietly with non-disclosure agreements. The courtroom appearance is just the beginning, man, Hogan grinned. I have forensic accountants digging into their shell companies as we speak, and my legal team is connecting with every resident who has received a notice of foreclosure. As we talked, my phone began to buzz. Neighbors were calling, texting, stopping by. News had spread like wildfire that Hogan had stormed the courthouse, cameras rolling for his documentary, bringing national media attention to our community's fight. By afternoon, neighbors I hadn't spoken to in years were gathering in my driveway. Hogan, always a showman, happily signed autographs, posed for pictures, and collected stories of financial harassment from countless residents. You know what this community needs? Hogan said as the crowd swelled. A true American financial revolution. Hogan's plan was bold but brilliant, an emergency town meeting, live-streamed to his millions of social media followers. Let's shine a light on these cockroaches, he said, already composing the message on his phone. The community center had never seen such an attendance. Residents who had never spoken at meetings arrived early to secure seats. Local media caught wind of the story and set up cameras outside. Somehow, national outlets picked up the story about wrestling legend battling corrupt HOA. Sterling arrived with his attorney, trying to ban recording devices and limit attendance to registered residents. Laughter from the crowd was the only reaction he got. When Hogan entered, the room erupted. He was dressed in full patriotic regalia, dressed head to toe in red, white, and blue, an American flag draped over his shoulders like a cape. My fellow Americans, he began, his voice needing no microphone to reach every corner of the packed room, I stand before you not as a celebrity, but as a citizen concerned about the direction of this community. For 20 minutes, he connected HOA abuse to broader principles of American freedom. He talked about veterans like me who fought for freedom abroad only to see it threatened at home. He recounted stories residents had shared with him of harassment, selective enforcement, and financial intimidation in this very room. In this very room, he thundered, pointing at Sterling, sits a man who believes rules are for little people, a man who thinks he can crush the American spirit with paper and intimidation. Then came the bomb. Hogan brought along a forensic accountant friend who analyzed the HOA financial records we had requested through legal pressure. The findings, now projected onto the community center wall, were devastating. Not a single dollar of the previous special assessments had gone to community improvements. Instead, the money had been laundered through shell companies, all of which led to Sterling's investment group. Even worse were the emails between Sterling and his investors. The $10,000 assessment is genius. Conservative estimate, 40% of these retirees can't pay. We will buy back at least 30 properties via foreclosure at 20 cents on the dollar. Once rezoning is approved, our ROI will exceed 400%. Target Johnson first, He's the only one who understands what we're doing." Gasps turned to angry murmurs, then chants of "Vote them out. Vote them out." Hogan raised his hand for silence. There is only one solution to tyranny, brothers and sisters, and that is pure American democracy. The vote was unanimous. Every board member, including Sterling, was removed. The twins, cornered by angry residents outside, offered a stammering apology for their role in the harassment campaign. Hogan, never one to miss a theatrical opportunity, looked directly into a news camera and said, "These white-collar paper pushers think they can steal the American dream from these good people. But they messed with the wrong community, man. They messed with Elderwood Residential, and Elderwood Residential is about to throw their whole operation in the towel." The crowd roared. Within weeks, Sterling's investment group was under investigation by state and federal authorities. The rezoning permit was denied. The fraudulent assessment was rescinded. And Elderwood remained exactly what it had always been, a quiet community where good neighbors looked out for one another. For me, I learned a valuable lesson. Sometimes, the best way to fight tyranny is with a 6'7" wrestling legend by your side. And sometimes, the American dream comes with a 24-inch python and a lot of Hulkamania. Would you like me to make any further adjustments?